Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League Predictions. This is for match week 3 of the Premier League. Now, we're live on YouTube, live on X and Facebook, so please do get your score predictions in. As per usual, I'm joined by Gareth McGuiness and we'll be running through all of the games for this coming weekend. 6 games will take place on Saturday, 4 games will take place on Sunday, and then every single side would have played 3 Premier League games, and then it will be the international break for a couple of weeks, and then we return for match week 4. Now, Gareth, how are you?
All good, Chris. Excited today. I'm going on holidays after this podcast, for the prediction show, as we call it. So I'll enjoy the next sort of week or so. Good way to end the summer, and suppose it takes up a bit of the international break as well, because I only have to suffer then for 1 week. I'm not a massive fan of international football. I love the World Cup and the Euros and stuff like that, but the actual qualifiers is like pulling teeth, isn't it?
Gareth, we're only 2 games in. It feels like it's never been away.
It's brilliant. I mean, we've had some unbelievable games, Chris, so far. Spurs last year were seen as the league entertainers. I think Liverpool this year may well be the league's entertainers. But look, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about it. But I think so far it looks a very wide open league, and we're seeing a lot of games, and you're just not sure. I don't know if you've heard of this last man standing competitions where everyone has to pick a team to try and win. I can't really put my hat on any team any week, because I think the league's so competitive this year.
Yeah, absolutely right. Gareth, what did you make of match week 2? The likes of Liverpool. They haven't really got off to the most. Well, I know they've won 2 out of 2, but have they performed in the way that you thought they would in the 2 games? They beat Bournemouth 4-2, and of course that last minute, well, I say last minute, that 100th minute winner against Newcastle. I suppose a lot of Liverpool fans would have thought that they would have done things far easier at the start of the season.
Well, that's it. I mean, that's what I was saying. Everyone was Spurs was kind of everyone's second favourite team to watch last year after their own team, because there was a lot of high-scoring games, and it seems like for Arne Slot's style of play last year was kind of more resilient and dogged, and they had a lot of quality with Mo Salah scoring a lot of goals, but they've brought in a lot of attacking talent, and you're already seeing the issues of trying to get the balance in the team right. And I think that's one thing we've seen with Spurs so far, is the balance of the team looks really, really good. Whereas Liverpool at the minute, they're having to outscore teams. They win games, and they haven't been the most convincing defensively. And I think if you include the Community Shield, they've conceded 2 goals in all 3 games against Crystal Palace, Bournemouth, and Newcastle. And let's be honest, they could have conceded a lot more. I think it's great for the neutral for us to watch games involving Liverpool, because I think it's going to be, high scoring games. But can you win the league playing like that? That'll be the concern that some Liverpool fans have, because you can't rely on scoring 3 and 4 goals every week. You will eventually come unstuck. And the biggest worry was that was against a 10-man Newcastle team. We know recognised striker, and had also had Anthony Gordon, who's their second most reliable output of goals, sent off, and Newcastle looked like they could score at every opportunity.
Yeah. Well, so far out of 2 games, Arsenal, Spurs and Liverpool lead the way in the league table, and those are the only 3 clubs that have won 2 out of 2. Of course, Spurs face Bournemouth at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Saturday, and then Liverpool face Arsenal at Anfield on Sunday afternoon. And there are only 2 clubs that have lost both games so far in the Premier League, and that is Wolves and West Ham. West Ham sitting bottom of the table. Gareth, we're going to go to the first game. This one is the early kickoff on Saturday, 12:30. Chelsea take on Fulham, West London derby. Now, Fulham won this exact fixture 2-1 last season, ending a 21-game winless streak away to Chelsea in all competitions. They've never won consecutive visits to Stamford Bridge in their history. Can they do it again?
I think Fulham are a really inconsistent team. I think 1 week they can play like a team that could push for a European spot, and then our team don't really perform. And it's that consistency that lets teams like Fulham and Bournemouth and Brighton and Brentford to a certain degree under Thomas Frank down, because on any given day they can beat anyone in the league, but also they can lose to anyone. I think Fulham last year had a number of big results, like you say, including beating Chelsea, but I think they also dropped points against the likes of Ipswich and Leicester and Southampton at times. So I think that shows you where Fulham are at. Marco Silva looks very unhappy, like he always does. He's complaining about the lack of transfer business, like he's been complaining about for a few years at Fulham. But he has put together a very good squad of players there, and I think you've seen it on Sunday against Man United when they weren't at their best in the first half, but he had players like Smith Rowe and Jimenez to come on and change the game, and Fulham battled back for a draw and possibly could have won the game later on. So I think Fulham will go to Chelsea knowing that there's vulnerability in Chelsea. I know they got a great result against West Ham last week with that 5-1-1, but I think at the minute West Ham are in such disarray that it will be hard to read too much into that result because, West Ham have been beaten 3-0 by Sunderland, who have then lost to Burnley. So that tells you kind of that excitement that people had about Sunderland kind of waned after the Burnley game. So West Ham then lose 5-1 to Chelsea and lose the Wolves in the Cup, who have also been struggling. So hard to read into how Chelsea have started the season. I think we'll learn a lot more about Chelsea after this game tomorrow or on Saturday, sorry.
A lot of people are saying Chelsea are title contenders, Gareth. Would you go along with that?
No, I don't see that, Chris, to be honest. I think defensively, there's still a vulnerability. I think the goalkeeper, there's still question marks. They've got a lot of attacking talent, but trying to get all that attacking talent under the one team is proving difficult. He's already made changes to the, it was a different front three that played in the first game against Crystal Palace, did the front three that played in the West Ham game. I do have to say, Esteval looks a real talent. Only 16 years of age, I think he is, but he looks a real talent. There's an issue with trying to get João Pedro and Delap into the same team. So I think that there's a lot for Maresca to work out over the next few weeks. They've definitely got a squad of players that are, if they get injuries, they can probably cope. And that's one of the arguments that we have with Spurs is maybe haven't got the squad. Chelsea do have the players, but I just think defensively, Chris, there's still a lot of question marks. And I think they're a team that will definitely be pushing for a top 4 spot. But I do think they're short of competing for the Premier League.
Well, both of these sides going into this game are unbeaten. Chelsea have won 1, drawn 1, and Fulham have drawn both of their games so far. Gareth, what's your score prediction on this one? I think I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
I think it's going to be a very tight game. I think it's a great way to start the weekend. The West London derby. Fulham, I think Fulham see Chelsea as potentially their closest and biggest rival. Obviously, there hasn't been a lot of competitiveness between the clubs in the league in terms of their position and trophies won over the last 20 years, but I still think Fulham will be up for this game, and I think a 12:30 game sometimes they can be very tight games as well. So I am going to go for a 2-2 draw.
Interesting. 2 draws again. Right, next up, Gareth. This one is going to be huge for Ruben Amorim at Old Trafford. Manchester United face Burnley. Manchester United have just been knocked out of the League Cup by Grimsby before, the clubs in the Champions League and the Europa League have even entered this competition. They've been knocked out in round 2. Finished 2-2 against Grimsby. Ended 12-11 on penalties. Absolutely crazy night for them. How under pressure is Ruben Amorim? The amount of money that he's spent and his record at Manchester United, quite frankly, is dismal.
It is. He's under huge pressure. I mean, if you go back 2 years ago, Chris, the Ange's first season, the frustration that we had losing that game against Fulham on penalties.
Yeah.
Now, I know Fulham are a Premier League team, but we realise we know European football. It's a perfect opportunity to go on a cup run. And if you look at it now, Man United have only got Premier League games between now and the FA Cup starting in January. So, although they aren't in Europe, they could have used this as a potential way to galvanise a cup run and also focus on the Premier League. Now it feels very doom and gloom. There was a lot of cautious optimism around Man United after that performance against Arsenal. They didn't get the result, but there was a lot they like about the performance. They start the game against Fulham particularly well, but faded in the second half. And I think Gary Neville referenced it in his podcast that it was like reopening the old wounds in that second half, and the wounds were cast open last night because that was a performance of a team that is, you would question, are they playing for the manager? And there was a number of changes, but they go to a League 2 side in Grimsby, and it was a strong enough Man United team. You still had Cunha, you still had Kobe Manu playing, you had Sesko who made his first 90-minute start, you had Diego Dalot, there was Harry Maguire, a lot of experience on that team. But like we referenced with Chelsea, Chris, I think when you don't have that defensive stability and you don't have confidence in your goalkeeper, it's very difficult to win matches at any level, because when you've watched Man United over the first few weeks, it looks at any given point, as soon as the team gets a set piece, the goalkeeper looks uneasy. That sets the nervousness through the team. And it was a shock last night, but it's not a big shock when you think about it, because we've seen that type of performance by Man United in the past under so many different managers. And then you see the reaction of Ruben Amorim last night, unable to watch the penalties, because a bit like we says outside the stadium, Frioli, that sick feeling, not again. And I think Ruben Amorim was having that sick feeling in his stomach last night of, he thought maybe they turned the corner with that performance against Arsenal, but they're back into the doldrums now, and there is huge pressure on this game at the weekend. You may look at it and go, it's a perfect game, it's Burnley at home. But if they fail to win this, Chris, you look at it and they've got a difficult run of games coming up after the international break. I think they've got to play Man City next. And there's a couple of other difficult ones on there as well after that. And you'll be looking, going, when's our first one coming from? So the manager's under huge pressure. I don't think whatever happens tomorrow on Saturday, he will be sacked. But I think if results didn't improve by the October international break, there will be a decision to make.
Yeah, that was my next question, actually. I'll give you some facts here, Gareth. And I think on paper, but of course, it never works out this way. On paper, it looks like that it will be a home win. But Manchester United have lost just one of the last 25 home games against Burnley in all competitions, winning 15, drawing 9, going down 2-0 in January 2020. And Manchester United are unbeaten in their last 23 Premier League games against promoted sides, winning 20 and drawing 3, since a 4-1 loss at Watford back in November 2021. Personally, Gareth, I think that Manchester United will scrape this one. And when I say scrape it, I'm going to say 1-0. I think that the home crowd will certainly help them. Although I feel like there will be a lot of frustration at Old Trafford, because if you think over the years, they are so used to winning trophies. They are so used to battering teams at home. And it's a very, very different Manchester United. And I completely agree with you. The goalkeeping situation at Old Trafford, when you look at some of the goalkeepers that Man United have had, in the Premier League, and now you look at Onana, not good enough.
Yeah, it's a real concern. I think at this level, if you don't have a goalkeeper that you're confident in, it just spreads that unease through the team. And I think you look at the other goalkeeper that played in the first couple of games, Binder. He had a nightmare against Arsenal with a goal they conceded.
Yep.
And that was the difference in the game. And United actually played probably their best performance this season so far. And last week there was a number of times, even when Man United were on top, where Fulham got a counter attack, it went out for a corner, and the goalkeeper was running around all over the show. He looked really uncomfortable. And I think that's the problem that Ruben Amorim has at the moment. He brings Onana back on last night. He looks just as uncomfortable. And he was never the most assured goalkeeper, but he was a very good shot stopper at one time. But even last night, some of those penalties, he got his hand in some of them and couldn't keep them out. So at the minute, it looks like Onana can't even save a shot. And at this level, Chris, that's just unacceptable. I do think there is a real problem in the dressing room still at Man United. I thought Ruben Amorim might have been the manager to change that, but I'm starting. Do you know, we speak a lot about mental health and stuff. His mental health at the minute looks like he's struggling, because that interview he gave last night was very concerning. He made a number of points about if this doesn't change, I can't change all the players again. Somebody else will have to change. As he making out that maybe he feels he's going to resign, or is he looking for the sack? I don't know. But it was a very strange interview. And I think the next week's is going to be really important for Ruben Amorim and Man United. This is a must-win game. I feel they need to try and get over this Grimsby result as quickly as possible. I'm on the camp with you at home. I think they'll just do enough. I'm going to go for a 2-1. Man United 1.
2-1. Gareth, I suppose we haven't really spoken about Burnley, because they got their first win last weekend at home against Sunderland, and I felt like that was a massive win for them. Playing Sunderland at home, both two newly promoted clubs, big win for them. In their second game, and the last time actually Manchester United played Burnley at Old Trafford was in April 2024, and that finished as a 1-1 draw. Right, you're going to go for 2-1. Burnley, how impressed have you been with them? Because, of course, we faced them on the opening weekend of the season. 3-0 win. They didn't concede many goals last season in the Championship. Kept a lot of clean sheets. You know that Scott Parker will, shore up that defence, particularly after conceding 3 on the opening weekend at Spurs. But big win for them last week.
Yeah, it was a huge one. And I think it's very important that after just 2 weeks, all the 3 promoted teams have a win each. They've all got off the mark. Leeds beat Everton on the opening weekend. Sunderland beat West Ham on the opening weekend. And then Burnley go and beat Sunderland last weekend. Look, it was no secret that they had the toughest start. Sunderland had a home game. Leeds had a home game. Burnley had to go to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So they had the most difficult game last week. On the first week, of course, Sunderland at home, you could say, was a great first home game they have, playing against the fellow promoted team. But it was, as you say, important because if they had lost that and found themselves 6 points behind Sunderland already, we know how difficult it is for promoted teams. They won games at this level. So, yeah, a huge one. I do expect to see more of that from Burnley in terms of clean sheets is going to be the only way for them to get points, I think. I don't really see them as a team that's going to score 3 and 4 goals any week, never mind most weeks. They're going to have to win games 1-0, 2-1. And yeah, a huge result at home. And Turf Moor, under previous Premier League Burnley managers, was always a tough place to go. If you think about Sean Dyche, especially, under Van Company, it became too easy for teams to go to Turf Moor because of the style of play. I think Scott Parker will definitely look at that and try and make Turf Moor a real tough place to go. A bit like how it used to be under Stoke, how it used to be under the previous Burnley regime. And that'll be the key for Burnley to stay up, because we know from a Spurs point of view, and our clubs will tell you this, going to Burnley was always a difficult place to go.
Yeah. Right, Gareth, next up, Sunderland take on Brentford. Sunderland currently in 7th, Brentford in 10th. Both teams have played 2, both have won 1, both have lost 1. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, well, Sunderland were brought back down to earth last week because that 3-0 home one against West Ham was kind of like a roof raiser and a great way to start the season.
Yeah.
But I think that'll be a real disappointment that they were playing an all promoted team, albeit away from home. But that was a real chance to build momentum, and if they had got a 1 there already, being 6 points ahead of Burnley, who'll be one of the favourites to go down. We seen it last year. Some of the promoted teams only won 4 or 5 games all season, so that would have given them a good platform to kick on. But I think that result will definitely probably a bit of a reality check that. I heard people saying Sunderland could be a team that's in no danger at all, could be fighting for mid-table spots. But look, that West Ham result, and we've seen with West Ham already, that it's probably not too wise to be reading on the teams that are beating West Ham at the moment, because they've lost 3 games, including the cup game. So we'll learn more about Sunderland in this game. I think Brentford had a really difficult start away at Nottingham Forest. There's been a lot of negativity around, obviously, some of the players that have left and losing the manager and Thomas Frank, and obviously the Owen Vista situation that's been dragging on all summer. But Keith Andrews has dealt with it well. That was a very impressive result last week. They beat Aston Villa and they deserved their victory. It wasn't like they were hanging on. They probably should have been out of sight in the first half. They had a very controversial goal ruled out just before half time. And then a very impressive result in the cup, going and beating Bournemouth 2-0 on Tuesday night. So it definitely seems like Brentford have that storm in the teacup has passed a bit. But this is a big game for both teams. Again, an opportunity for one of these teams who have been tapped as relegation candidates. Somebody can get on to 6 points here and give himself, a platform of 6 points from your opening 9 is a fantastic way to start the season. And both these clubs would have put their hands off for that kind of start.
Yeah, Gareth, you rightly mentioned about Sunderland's opening weekend win, 3-0 at the Stadium of Light against West Ham. Now, in their previous 16 Premier League campaigns, only once have Sunderland won their first 2 home matches in a season, winning their opening 2 at the Stadium of Light in 2001, and that was under Peter Reid, so some time ago. What are you going to go for here? Sunderland v Brentford. I think we want to go for... I got bantered last week for keep going for draws. I think I'm going to go for a 1-1 again.
I think it'll be that type of game, Chris. I do think it'll be very, very tight. I'm just going to say home advantage gets Sunderland over the line. I'm going to go for a 2-1, Sunderland 1.
Okay. Right. Next up, our club, Tottenham Hotspur. 2 wins out of 2 so far. Thomas Frank has got off to the perfect start. 2 games, 2 wins, 2 clean sheets, 5 goals scored, 0 conceded. brilliant start for Frank. That win at Man City last week was unbelievable. João Palhinha has been named the Premier League's Player of the Week for Matchweek 2. Of course, Richarlison won the award for Matchweek 1. So, we've had a good start when you've got two players winning those awards. Spurs will be hosting Bournemouth 3 p.m. on Saturday. Bournemouth so far have played 2. They have won 1. They have lost 1. That defeat was, of course, at Liverpool on that Friday night that kicked off the Premier League campaign. Gareth, first up, let's talk a little bit about that performance at Manchester City. I don't think a lot of people expected that.
Well, I did predict it last week on the show that we would beat Man City. So you can't.
There's always one. There's always one now, isn't there?
You can't quite me that already. But no, as you say in the media, especially after how Man City started the season away at Wolves, there was a lot of people saying, "Oh, Man City are back. Man City are going to be a different force this year. Pep Guardiola will be absolutely fuming of how last season went, a trophyless season, which is a very rare thing for Pep and a very rare thing for Man City. They won 4-0 on the opening day away from home. And yes, Wolves are a team that possibly could struggle this year, but they still go away from home and won 4-0. And Reinders looked particularly impressive. Oscar Bob looked like he got over his injury problems well. Haaland got off to a goal-scoring start. People are thinking, oh, if Spurs are anyway off it here, Man City could have an absolute field day. But we knew, Chris, because we were there in Italy at the Super Cup, that Thomas Frank was going to have a plan to stop Man City and nullify that threat. And it was executed with absolute perfection. Of course, you're always going to have concede chances against a team with Man City's quality. And you always feel against Man City that you probably need to score first. 1, because they're a top quality team, and 2, because I think their record when they go in front, especially at home, is absolutely incredible. I don't think they lose many, never mind even draw many. So once we got that first goal, and that was my prediction based on that, that if we got the first goal, it would make it very difficult. And I thought we would learn a lot from what happened in the second half against PSG. And that was definitely shown in the game of how we managed it. And if there was a tendency to maybe sit back and soak up pressure against PSG, there was an appetite not to do it in this game. It was all about trying to get a third goal and kill the game. And I thought it was a really brave, intelligent, and thought out tactical plan from Thomas Frank. And look, you have to be ruthless when you get your opportunities. And in that first half, Spurs were ruthless, and that's what the top teams do. And I think it was a bit of a shell shock to the football community that watches Premier League football, because although Thomas Frank is highly rated, I still think people thought Spurs would be a mid-table, maybe a team that pushes for 6th, 7th at best. Nobody really put us in the conversation of being a team that could maybe compete for one of the Champions League spots. And I think people's minds has changed after that. Although we maybe are short in terms of squad numbers, if we were to, keep most of our first 11 fit, I think that's a really, really strong team to have there. But I'm sure we'll talk about it. We do need reinforcements if we want to see that level of performance continue throughout the season. But a brilliant start for Thomas Frank. And if you looked at the fixtures when they come out, Chris, I think the Premier League ranked, the points per game. And I think Spurs' first 9 or 10 games was seen as the easiest on paper. Now, we know that football isn't played on paper, but that was the most difficult game between now and possibly November, I think, when we play Chelsea and Man United at the start of November. So there's a real opportunity for Thomas Frank to build momentum, get points on the board, and going on the international break at home, wouldn't it be absolutely brilliant? They won your first 3 games, keeping all our clean sheet. You've got West Ham coming up after the break. You look on disarray. So there's a real chance for Spurs to build and get off to a great start, and long may it continue.
Gareth, Tottenham have kept consecutive clean sheets in the Premier League this season so far, having only kept 2 clean sheets in their last 22 games of last season, shipping 2.1 goals on average in those 22. They haven't kept 3 in a row since May 2022. Now, we know that Bournemouth can be a very tough side. We know that they can be a very difficult side to beat. What have you made of them this season, and what have you made of the job that Andoni Iraola has done there?
Yeah, I think Bournemouth are a very tricky opponent for any team. I think, again, if Bournemouth are at their best, this will be a really, really difficult game, because they can beat anyone on their day, home or away. We've seen some of the results they had last year. I mean, the one I remember, because I was actually on holidays during it, was the Newcastle one, where they absolutely obliterated Newcastle at St James's Park. I think it was 4-1. So they've got that kind of performance in them. They also beat, I think, Nottingham Forest 5-0. in a home game when Forest were flying. So they are a team that can upset the apple cart on any given day. I mean, you look at that opening night of the season, 2-0 down at Anfield. Most teams go under and get beat 4 or 5-0. They battle back to 2-2 and definitely deserved the result on the night. I do think games like this should Bournemouth more than so. Like, obviously they lost to Brentford in the cup during the week 2-0, where maybe Brentford were a lot more defensive and Bournemouth had to break them down. Whereas I think they'll go to Tottenham knowing that the onus will be on Spurs. They break Bournemouth down, and they're a very, very dangerous team on the counter attack. And a bit like Thomas Frank, I think Andoni Iraola is a very good tactician, and he can set teams up for transitions very, very well. So look, this is going to be a dangerous game. Bournemouth are a team that can't be written off. And it's a bit like if Bournemouth were to get the first goal, Chris, it will be a very difficult afternoon because we know how strong they are counter-attacks. So I think it's really important for Spurs to get a goal as early as possible to control the game and make it difficult for Bournemouth to get back on it.
Gareth, as a football coach, I want to ask you this question. So Thomas Frank said in a press conference a couple of weeks ago that there are three key factors in a game that you heavily focus on. What will you be focusing on against Bournemouth this weekend?
I think he'll want ultimate control. I think he's a manager that likes to have control of a game, limit counterattacks, limit dangerous situations. And we've seen that to a certain extent against PSG and against Man City, that whilst we give up some chances, Vicario hasn't been a busy goalkeeper so far this. You look at, I think Thomas Frank's one of his key focuses for every game is, can we gain an advantage in any area? And that's why set pieces is so important for Thomas Frank, because I think under previous managers, Chris, the ball went out for a corner and we're like, oh, right, corner, what are we going to do here? Whereas I think now there's a general excitement when we do get a free kick or we do get a corner that something may happen, because there's an organisation around trying to get the most out of set piece opportunities, even if that's a long throw into the box. So I think he tries to win the battles in both boxes. Duels is really important. I think that's one of the reasons we beat Man City last week, was the duels we won in midfield. We outnumbered, out-bullied Man City to a certain point with Palhinha, Bentancur and Sarr in that midfield. And I think that'll be his midfield three, regardless of if any players come on in the next few days. I don't think he will move away from that midfield against the best teams in the league, because it's got such a physical midfield, and teams find it very difficult. We've seen Liverpool, all the quality they have. That Newcastle midfield of Tonali, Joelinton, and Bruno Guimaraes was an absolute nightmare for Liverpool. So winning the physical battles are really, really important. And I'm sure he'll be trying to do all those things on Saturday. And of course, be ruthless when the chances come. We were ruthless against Burnley. We were Charleston and Johnson, and very similar on Man City, very ruthless. Maybe up until some part of the second half when we probably could have finished the game off with more goals. But I think that'll be key to winning this game, because Bournemouth will definitely come and give us a proper game. I'm not expecting an easy game at all on Saturday.
Bournemouth have earned more points in their 6 games against Spurs since returning to the Premier League in 2022. So played 7, won 2, drawn 1, lost 3 than they did in the 10 games in their first stint between 2015 and 2020. Played 5, won 1, drawn 2 and lost 7. Gareth, what I wanted to ask you about is João Palhinha. Of course, he's won the award this week. How impressed have you been with him? How much does it underline the fact that we needed a number 6 in this Tottenham Hotspur team? And the transfer window, when you think of players that Mohamed Kudus and João Palhinha have come in, you can tell that they have made an impact straight away in this Tottenham Hotspur team. In the transfer window, there's now 4 days left. There are a lot of very unhappy Tottenham Hotspur fans right now in terms of the club not getting a lot of other business done, impact players. We have said as Spurs fans, I think everyone has been aligned in the fact that we've needed a whole handful of players to come into this team and make a real impact. Although Thomas Frank has got to a perfect start as Tottenham Hotspur boss, and you mentioned about the games that we're playing in the next couple of months, is it a good thing when a manager gets off to a flying start like this? Because do a club then look and go, well, you can get the best out of players, we don't need any more signings? It's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we want our club to do well, but at the same time, we want to see the manager get the players that he desperately needs to climb up that Premier League table. And most importantly, I'm going to go back to that term that the club have used, Daniel Levy, Vinay Venkatesham, Johan Langer, about we want to fight on all fronts. So we know down the line, if we have a few injuries, like we have done in the previous seasons under Ange Postecoglou, we all know what situation we're going to be in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was important. I know it was a long question there, Chris, so I'll try and answer as best as I can there and break it down. But I think the most important thing, I think, when a new manager comes in, especially one that doesn't have a top pedigree, whether that be in the Premier League or in Europe. Thomas Frank had never managed in Europe before. He came from Brentford, who are a team that, came up from the Championship. First focus was keep him on the league and build, and he done a brilliant job. Brentford were never really in any relegation trouble, and it just missed out in Europe a couple of times, so he exceeded expectations. He got the best out of the players available at Brentford and the recruitment system that was put in place. So I think Spurs fans still needed to be convinced when he came on. Was he the right appointment? It's one thing getting the best out of a situation at Brentford, but this is Tottenham Hotspur. There's certain expectations that are in place, and I think the fans needed to be convinced. I don't think there's a Spurs fan out there at the minute that needs to be convinced now because of how well Thomas Frank has started. And look, we can go back to, Nuno won his first 3 games, but it was very different performances. This seems very, very convincing how we're winning games.
A very different feel, yeah.
It does very different. And, to go to Man City and perform how we did was, we beat Man City before, but at times we've been hanging on. And, it felt like we've maybe had a bit of fortune on our side. It didn't really feel like that on Saturday. I think even Pep Guardiola's Spurs deserved to win the game. Luis Enrique says after the PSG game, Spurs deserved to win the game. So these are 2 of the best teams in the world, and Spurs have matched them and maybe even played better in both games. So I think there's your first tick as a manager to the fans, that the fans are very confident with this manager now, that there can be better times ahead than there was under the previous manager, especially in the league. Of course, we'd had won the Europa League, but 17th was not acceptable for a club of this size. Thomas has already seen put that sort of relationship with the fans. When he went over to the away end at Man City, there seemed to be that real connection already between the fans and the players and the manager. And I think that's really, really important for any manager to get that as quickly as possible, because there will be a sticky patch ahead at some stage. And that relationship with the fans can really help you navigate through that period. In regards to the transfer market, Chris, there's no secret it's been a very frustrating window for the club, for Thomas Frank, I'm sure, and for especially the fans, because it seemed like Morgan Gibbs-White was going to be a Spurs player, then he wasn't. It seemed like Eze was going to be a Spurs player, then he wasn't. And that was 2 top targets for a key position in the team, because we know that midfield at the minute, whilst it's very robust, physical, a lot of energy in it, it lacks a creative midfielder. And against teams maybe like Bournemouth at home, you would like to have somebody either in the starting 11 or on the bench to come on and change it, because we know James Maddison may not kick a ball all season. We know Kulusevski's out until possibly the second half of the season, and they're 2 of them more creative players. So this is a game that you might see on Saturday where, if you don't get an early goal, you would love to have that player to come on off the bench and unlock a defence. And at the minute, we're going to have to find different ways to win games. Where I'm at with now, Chris, is I'm beginning to lose any confidence that we will sign anyone. I think at what you're seeing at the moment is, and it's not just Spurs, but Newcastle and Spurs are probably the 2 clubs that have had the most knockbacks in this window. That, Newcastle go to Wolves and are willing to pay over the odds for their striker. Wolves are saying, we do not want to sell our striker this late in the window. Man City do not want to sell Savinho this late in the window. I think that's where we've come to, Chris, that unless you're going to pay ridiculous money for a player, and I don't know if you've ever watched the Sunderland Till I Die Netflix documentary, but there's a very famous scene where Sunderland signed Will Grigg for a lot of money for a League One team, and it didn't work out, and they panicked on the last day. And sometimes, whilst we need players, Chris, panicking, it could be the worst thing to do. And I just wonder whether there might be a conversation that the club has with Thomas Frank, maybe after the Bournemouth game, that Thomas, unfortunately, we've made mistakes in the window, but the worst thing we could do now is compound the mistake by bringing in a player that's not suitable for the style of play, not suitable for the club, and then we're stuck with him in a year's time trying to shift him, and we can't get the money back. So, look, if we can get the right player, Chris, I'm all for it, but I still think panicking could be the worst thing we've done, because we've done that in the past, Chris, and it hasn't always worked out. Now, does that make it acceptable for the window we've had? Absolutely not. Daniel Levy will have to apologise to the fans if we can't get the players on, because we were promised we were promised a sirloin steak and we haven't even got a burger, because this window has not been the window that the board told us it would be. But I am starting to lose any confidence we will bring in anyone at the moment, because it seems to be a market where clubs and there's no secret, Chris. We're in the market for top players. Gibbs White, Eze, Xavi Simons has been like it's not a run of the mill player. They're looking for a superstar to come in, and who wants to lose a superstar player with 3 or 4 days left in the window? And the issue being, Chris, is we're seeing it with Wolves that even they may feel 60 million is a lot of money for Strand Larson, but they're looking at going, teams will know we've got 60 million. We may have to spend 60 million to get another player on, and they may not be as good as the one we're selling. And I think that's the issue that Spurs have, is if we go to Aston Villa and drop 70 or 80 million down for Morgan Rogers, everyone knows Aston Villa's got 70 or 80 million then, and they may not be able to replace Morgan Rogers' ability even with that money. So I think at the moment we're seeing it with Isak and Liverpool that it could be a bit of a damp squad, this transfer window, for a lot of teams. And the likes of Spurs and the likes of Newcastle will be absolutely gutted of how the windows have went.
It'd be interesting to see what happens in the next 4 days, certainly, Gareth. But as I mentioned, Mohamed Kudus and João Palhinha coming in have been real impact players for us. Really, really pleased with them from my point of view. Son, of course, has gone out the door. Basuma, it does look like he's going to go out the door, although Galatasaray, it's been reported this morning, Galatasaray, this deal could fall through because they are worried about his physical condition. It's also been reported by The Sun this morning that Xavi Simons is now in London, but it was reported in the last couple of days, certainly in the last 24 hours, widely, that Chelsea still want to sign Xavi Simons, but it depended on selling it in Nkunku, but it does look like that's going to happen now. So I know a lot of Spurs fans are getting excited about the possible signing of Xavi Simons, but Fabrizio Romano even said he wants Chelsea. So this one would be interesting to see if that does fall through and then Spurs nip in.
I think the other thing that the club can't afford is another situation where we lose out on a player in our team. Gibbs White, we lost out with him signing the new contract at Forest.
Yeah.
We've looked at their rivals in Arsenal. If we lose out in Xavi Simons, if we go on, get a fee agreed, and he ends up coming for a medical, and he doesn't turn up for his medical, does his medical at Cobham for Chelsea and signs for Chelsea, that'll be a hat-trick of embarrassments. And I just think at the minute the club will be very, very wary of that. So unless they get a real sign that Simons wants Spurs, I don't think we'll approach that deal at all.
Gareth, a lot of Spurs fans I've seen are talking about Lookman, and even Fabrizio Romano mentioned Lookman the other day. What do you know about him? How would he fit into this Tottenham side?
Well, there's been a lot of players linked over the last few days, and Lookman, look, if you cast your mind back to that final with Atalanta played by Leverkusen in the Europa League final, I think it was the year before we won it. Yeah, Atalanta won it in Dublin. Ademola Lookman scored a hat-trick in the final. He's a very talented player, Chris, but inconsistent. And I think at the minute, what Spurs is looking for is a player that's going to be... We've got players like Tell, like Odebear, who are very inconsistent. They probably have a level of ability, but we need someone that's going to have a regular output. And I just wonder if Lookman's another one of those players that comes in, may look good on the eye, but doesn't do enough. Kudus looks like a player that's ready to perform at the top level. Lookman has got experience in Europe, Champions League, Europa League, but I'm not convinced. And your chat, I think they're talking around 50 million for him as well. And the other name being linked is Paqueta. Now, whilst he's a very talented player, Chris, I just don't think he suits our style of play in our system. And I think...
I don't think it's that. West Ham are not selling him. No chance.
Yeah, but even at that, I think the way he plays, he's very lax, and he's not the most energetic around the pitch. I just don't think he would suit Thomas Frank at all. And I think if we were to go and splash 60 or 70 million on him, it would be a player that doesn't fit the system. And again, Chris, we've been here before where we've been on deadline day and we've signed players, and whilst there is a bit of an excitement around it, after a few games you realise that this is definitely not the type of player we wanted, and we've just panicked. So it may be that Thomas Frank, Chris, like you says, may have to work a miracle and get the squad through to January, and may maybe reinvest in January and bring some players on. It's not acceptable that we've been in this situation, but I think what needs to happen is, I think Daniel Levy and Vinay nearly put out a statement as soon as the window's over, if we haven't signed anyone, and apologise to the fans. Now, it may
I
not do
did,
anything, but at least there is a realisation that we've made mistakes here.
I did say this when Thomas Frank was appointed, and I did say this at the start of the transfer window, that there could be a heavy emphasis on Thomas Frank getting the best out of players and bringing in a couple of players. I had hoped that it wouldn't be like that. I'd hoped that Spurs show real ambition and really go for it. And like you've mentioned, some of those names, Eze, Morgan Gibbs-White, Savinho, etc. I would have hoped that, one or two of those would have got over the line and we would have been, very, very excited about this season. But I feel like everyone is in the same boat at the moment where we're very happy with what we've seen so far, but we're all worried about one or two injuries, particularly with the Champions League campaign. And of course, the Champions League draw takes place on Thursday evening at 5 p.m. UK time. That's going to be, huge for Spurs, and to be fighting on all fronts with the squad that we've got, with a couple of injuries. Because when you look at the squad, particularly with Kulusevski and Maddison out, Maddison a very long-term injury, we're probably in a worse position squad-wise than we were last season. We finished 17th in the Premier League.
Well, Chris, I don't know if you've seen the draw simulations where I think all these media outlets are reporting best case scenario for the English teams and worst case. And if you look at our worst case scenario for the draw, you could play PSG, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, Juventus, Napoli, Galatasaray, Monaco. So you look, if that was our draw, every game there is difficult. Now, there is a situation where you could be very fortunate, but I wonder, will this draw today prompt even more of a panic? Because if it is a very difficult draw, there may be a sense of we can't afford to wait until January because we could end up not qualifying for the second part of the Champions League. So I don't know, Chris. I mean, I'm sure the club will be working tirelessly to get players on because I think they know we are short. But I really hope that there isn't this feeling of, well, Thomas is showing in opening games. Well, even if we do get a couple of injuries, this is a manager that can navigate us through a tricky spell, because that is just not how top clubs operate. Top clubs sense where they're vulnerable and they fix it as soon as possible. And at the minute, we're failing to do that. We've been very naive in this transfer market, Chris. Very naive.
Well, Thomas Frank said that he's confident of getting at least one more in. So he obviously knows a lot more than what we do. Who that's going to be, let's wait and see. But in terms of score predictions, Tottenham v Bournemouth, Gareth, I'm going to go for a 2-1 Spurs win. I think we're going to go into the international break 3 wins out of 3, but I do think we're going to concede it in this one.
Yeah, I agree with we'll concede. I do think we'll be breached in this game, but I think we'll score 3 ourselves. So I'm going to go for a 3-1 Spurs 1, and Spurs to be top of the league going on the international break, because of course they are two teams on Sunday, and I'll keep my prediction for that. But I do feel if we win this game, we'll be going on top of the table.
Right. Next up, Wolves against Everton. Wolves have lost 2 out of 2 at the moment, and Everton, of course, they won their first Premier League game at their new stadium, so they have won 1, they have lost 1. Now, Wolves have lost just 2 of their 11 Premier League home games against Everton, winning 4 and drawing 5, going down 3-0 in April 2011 and 2-1 in January 2021. Wolves, Gareth, is it too early to call whether they could go down? Because in the last couple of seasons they've struggled, but the manager seemed to have come in and do a really good job. Is this a sort of start that you thought they're going to get off to?
I think Wolves have been in this situation for the last few years where they've had a very difficult start to the season, and they've often sacked managers, and then a new manager's come on, and there's been an upturn in form. Now, I think Wolves are going to be in for a nervous few days, because I've seen this stance from Wolves before where they say a player is not for sale and they end up selling him because the money's too good to turn down. I mean, I think they sold Mateus Nunes to Man City after saying he wasn't for sale on the final day last year, and on deadline day. They sold him to Man City. They've sold Al-Nuri, who they says they didn't want to sell to Man City. They've sold Cunha to Man United, who they didn't want to sell. And obviously there's increasing chatter of a third bid coming in from Newcastle for Strand Larsen, round about 60 million, or possibly in excess of 60 million. And he's a talented player, but it does feel that is a lot of money for a player they signed. I think he signed for 28 million last year, and there could be doubling their money after one season. And he struggled in the first half of last season, but of course He found his feet then, but he scores 2 goals on Tuesday night to turn defeat on the victory against West Ham in the Cup. So I think he's conducted himself really well, and obviously we spoke about some of the players in the last few weeks that haven't conducted themselves well. I think he is keen on the move to Newcastle from what I see, but he's not willing to cause a ruckus. But I just wonder, will Wolves find this money too hard to turn down? And because they've sold players in the past and just about script by and stayed up, will they be tempted to do the same again? But I think it's becoming so desperate for Wolves that they've lost so many top players. If they sell Strand Larson and don't get an adequate replacement done, they could be in for a very, very tough season, because I'm looking at the team and going, well, where's the goals going to come from? I mean, they're 2-1 down the other night. They have to bring him off the bench. They score the 2 goals to get them through. And I think that'll be a real, real worry for the manager, Vitor Pereira. He's done a fantastic job. They were in a real mess last year when he came in, and they had a great second half of the season. So, but it's always difficult to repeat that, Chris, especially if you end up losing your 3 best players from the season before. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Wolves in the next few days. But I think for them, I would be rejecting any kind of money from Newcastle and keeping their star striker, because goals keep you in leagues, Chris. Forget about the money. Falling into the Premier League is a huge one-fall, and dropping cash. And it's not always easy to bounce straight back. So very interesting to see what happens over there in the next couple of days.
Yeah, Borussia Dortmund have agreed a €26.5 million deal for Fabio Silva as well. So another player heading out the door at Molineux. Wolves v Everton. How do you see this one going, Gareth? Because Wolves really do need a win at home.
Yeah, they do need a win. And Everton last week, of course, were boosted with that. That first game, Chris, you probably know how it felt when Spurs played Crystal Palace in that first game in the new stadium. And look, it was an even longer wait for us, because we had a wait long by after the actual date that was planned, and we had a wait to April and that season to get that home game. And of course, it was a brilliant atmosphere from watching it on the TV. And Spurs won the game.
Brilliant.
No?
Yeah.
Yeah. And look, Everton weren't at their best on Sunday. I mean, I think they were fortunate. Brighton were a bit profligate in front of goal. I mean, they missed 2 or 3 great opportunities. Then Danny Welbeck misses a penalty. It just wasn't Brighton staying in front of the goal. Brighton, of course, bounced back last night with a 6-0 win in the Cup, albeit against lesser opposition in Oxford. But I think that was important for Brighton to get some goals, because I'm sure the confidence would have took a hit after, some of the chances they had against Everton. How they didn't score was an absolute miracle. But Everton's first 2 games haven't impressed me at all. Thought they were second best against Leeds, second best against Brighton. And I do think Wolves at home, this will be a game they'll be targeting 3 points. And I think it's a must-win game for Wolves, to be honest, because if you're sitting there with, pointless after 3 games, or even just sitting on the 1 point mark already, the jitters start to come in. And during that international break, during these international breaks, I think there is a lot of succession planning that clubs do. They use the 2 weeks to go, right, they look at the upcoming games and go, if we're not at a certain points by game 6 or game 7, we might make a change. And that'll be the conversations that clubs will be happening during this international break. So important for Wolves, they won, Chris. I'm going to go for a 2-1 home win for Wolves.
Okay, and 2-2. Another draw.
Specialist.
Right, next up is the late kickoff on Saturday. Leeds v Newcastle at Elland Road. Leeds have won 1 so far. They've lost 1. Newcastle haven't won a game yet. They've drawn 1 and lost 1. Leeds have lost just 1 of their last 6 Premier League games against Newcastle, winning 2 and drawing 3, going down 1-0 at home in January 2022. And Newcastle have won 50% of their Premier League away games against Leeds, 7 out of 14, their highest win rate against any side that they're faced more than 10 times on the road. Leeds, can they stay up? Newcastle, what do you expect from them?
Yeah, well, look, Leeds had that brilliant start against Everton on Monday Night Football. I thought it was really important for them to get off to a good start at home, because they can make that place a real difficult place to go for teams. We know the atmosphere at Leeds. Fans always get behind the team. And they rallied behind them that night and beat Everton 1-0. I thought it was always going to be a very difficult first away game going to Arsenal, who, don't concede many goals do the Arsenal. They're always very sound defensively. We know they've added players in the attacking area, and they're always a threat from set pieces, as Leeds found out. And look, it was a bit of a free hit for Leeds. That result at Arsenal won't determine where Leeds stay up or not. It'll be the games around teams in the bottom half that if they can win enough games, they'll be okay. Newcastle, I think they're hitting them at the right time, Leeds, because although there was a lot of optimism even after that late goal Liverpool got, I think Anthony Gordon's suspended for 3 games. They've lost Tonali. They've lost Joelinton as well, I think, to injury. So it's going to be a very weak-looking Newcastle team. And I think Leeds they'll never get a better opportunity to play Newcastle and get 3 points. But Newcastle will just be begging for that transfer window to close now, because it's been a very, very damaging few months in terms of the drama they've had to put up with Isak, who I think's conducted himself absolutely terribly. That club, he's put them through hell, to be honest. The behaviour of that player, he's let the fans down, he's let the club down. And what I can't understand is he's seen the other night with Newcastle. They've a damn good starting 11, Chris. A team that can definitely compete for the top 4. Maybe a bit short in terms of squad. They compete for the Premier League. But Newcastle are in the Champions League this year, and I guarantee they'll give a decent representative of themselves. So I don't really get this kick up and fuss to get out. But Newcastle are in a very, very difficult situation where they can't get anyone in, it seems. I know they're going to try again for Strand Larsen, but Vissa looks dead in the water. If Strand Larsen, if they get that last bid rejected now, I think they may walk away, and that may be it for Isak, because what club can sell their only striker, regardless of his behaviour? I think they'll have to try and force him to stay. Once the window closes, say, look, there's a World Cup coming up. You're going to have to get yourself ready for the World Cup. We'll let you go next year, but we need you to batten down the hatches and apologise to the fans, apologise to the players, and we'll let you go next year when we can get somebody of your level to come on, because I just think it's really, really unprofessional, Chris, what he's done, because I think Eddie Howe had told Isak, if we can get replacements on for you, we're more than happy to let you go, because he did say that he wanted to move on. But they have tried to get Sesko, they have tried to get Ekatiki, they have tried to get Mbumo. They've been trying to get Vissa, they've been trying to get Strand Larsen. So it's not as if Newcastle have been sitting on their hands. They have done everything they can to try and help Isak out, but he has done absolutely nothing in return to help Newcastle out. And I just think he deserves everything he gets. I really hope when the window closes on Monday that he's still a Newcastle player, and he has to make up with his teammates, make up with the fans, and come back into the team.
I was going to say, Gareth, that does look highly likely that he will stay. How awkward is it going to be for him? Not only to walk into that changing room, which obviously you've seen his teammates because he's back at the training ground, but how awkward is it going to be that Isak walks out, at St James's Park, to play for the club again when you have acted in such a way? That is going to be a very awkward moment for him.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult. But look, if he comes back in that first game and scores a goal, I'm not saying always forgiven, but the more goals you score, the more fans will forget about the past and concentrate on the future. I just think Newcastle are in a situation where they just can't afford to sell him, because what serious club can go on? What Champions League club can go on this season with no available striker? It will be absolutely criminal. They have to gamble on Isak. I think if it wasn't a World Cup year, their hands may be forced and tied and they sell on him, even if it meant they have no replacement. But I think the fact that they have a World Cup, Sweden have a really, really good chance of qualifying. He has got to play games to get himself ready for that World Cup. He can't sit and rot for the next 9 months. He's already been named in the Sweden squad, so that tells me that he's been doing some sort of training. And I think there'll be a conversation with his representatives and Newcastle, Eddie Howe, the owners. Look, give us your best now until next season. We'll let you go in the summer when we get a replacement, and you can have yourself a good World Cup. Because if you're not, Chris, you know it, at any level, if you're not playing games, you're not going to perform at the top level. And that will be what Isak knows and what his representatives will tell him.
Right, Gareth, score prediction time. What are you going for?
I just think with the injuries that Newcastle have, the suspension to Anthony Gordon, of course, Isak won't play in this game. Leeds have a really good opportunity here. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Leeds win.
I'm going to go for a 2-1 Newcastle win, which might surprise you. You probably thought I was going to go for a draw, didn't you?
I was going to say, Newcastle's injuries, Leeds at home. I can't call it. I'm going for a draw.
Right, we've got 4 games to talk about now, and those are the Sunday fixtures. Brighton take on Manchester City at 2 p.m. Brighton won 6-0 in the League Cup on Wednesday night. Of course, Manchester City lost to Spurs at the weekend. I tell you what, Gareth, I thought that I was really surprised that James Trafford played in this game against Tottenham. And I must say that I was surprised that Ederson didn't play. I know there's a lot of talk and rumours at the moment about Donnarumma possibly signing for Pep Guardiola. I felt like James Trafford let Man City down last week, although Spurs were exceptional. It's funny because when I did the newspaper video, all of the newspaper reports, it was all heavily focused on James Trafford making a mistake rather than Richarlison closing the goalkeeper down. And of course, we us scoring our second goal. But what have you made of Man City? Because you mentioned earlier about them being trophyless last season. Pep Guardiola just doesn't have seasons like that. I can't see that happening again. I feel like Man City will win a trophy this season. What one will it be?
No, it would be a big surprise if they didn't win a trophy. Although I do feel that they're second or third favourites. They won the Premier League. They might even be in the top 3 or 4 favourites. They won the Champions League, so it may be the domestic cup is their best route to success. But we know that a League Cup or FA Cup, whilst the fans will enjoy it, they'll feel that they only won one of the big 2, being the Premier League or the Champions League. And look, I mean, James Trafford, a young goalkeeper. He obviously came through the ranks at Man City, goes to Burnley. Man City buy him back. It was a big game for him to come on to. Well, I know he played against Wolves, but his first real big game as a test was against Spurs. And look, Pep Guardiola, we know how he wants his teams to play. But look, for as good as Ederson has been for Man City, we've seen Ederson make those mistakes in the past. I can remember a number of goals where Spurs caught Man City players out. We've seen that type of goal. I think Harry Kane's record-breaking goal, there was a very similar issue where the ball was played on by the goalkeeper to the midfield, and Højbjerg knocked it off one of the Man City players and gave it to Kane, and Kane scored. So it's a goal we've seen Man City concede before. It was just with a different goalkeeper this time, and of course, the goalkeeper gets a lot of criticism. Pep Guardiola wants his goalkeeper to play like that, but what he will be telling his goalkeeper is you've got to recognise when they play and when not to play, and that had danger written all over it because the body shape of the player receiving the ball was in totally. It was at a 180-degree angle. He wasn't even on the half turn, so he couldn't see anything behind him. And Sarr recognised that situation right away and nicked the ball off him. And if you look at that, don't want to get cast aside from Man City, but that was something that Spurs highlighted. They were very brave, Chris, in their press. I think when you see if you put the freeze frame on when Trafford kicks the ball, Spurs have 7 players between Trafford and the edge of the D, that 23-yard D. So they have 7 of your 10 outfielders in that area. Spurs knew exactly what Man City were going to do. So they prepared really well for Man City. And I think the Chelsea game where Ange Postecoglou's reign kind of went downhill, a lot of teams had identified the weaknesses that Chelsea exploited in that game and used it as a blueprint. I wonder will teams use Thomas Frank's blueprint against Man City as a way to beat them, because Spurs kind of locked them down and nullified them, and Man City's strengths are getting on the ball and playing out of the back. But Spurs made it really, really difficult for them to do that. And if teams, we know now, teams have so many analysts watching games that nothing really gets missed. So I think that's one of the challenges that Pep Guardiola will face, that the football world is changing. It's becoming more and more about data analysis than it is just about like sort of going with your eye. Everything's analysed in different sections by different people. Everyone's trying to gain advantages, especially when they're playing against top opposition. And that'll be the challenge for Pep Guardiola, because we know he's a very stubborn manager. He's not going to change that playing out of the back system, but it's got to improve because teams like Spurs will find loopholes to score goals against Man City. And I think Man City are one of those teams where if you can get 1 or 2 goals up against them, they don't really have, I know we said this behind Postecoglou, but I don't really see them as a plan B team. I don't see them going long ball. Pep Guardiola, yes, he'll make little changes, but it very much has the same style of play. So you seen that last year when Spurs got 2-0 up against them in the first half. Man City had no answers in the second half, and Spurs ran out 4-0 winners. And it was the same in this game, where Man City had no answers to that Spurs first half performance. And that'll be the difference between winning leagues and maybe competing for domestic cups for Man City. They've got to find ways of changing games around when they are up against it and they've given away soft goals.
Well, I think we know what quality Manchester City possess in the whole of their squad. What about this for a stat here, Gareth? Manchester City have won 19 out of 30 league matches against Brighton, which is 63.3%. Among the 46 teams that they've faced 25 plus times, the only side that they have a higher win ratio against is Swansea, 23 wins in 34 games, and that is 67.6%. I can't see anything but a Manchester City win here. I'm going to go 2-0 City. What about you?
Yeah, I think Brighton are a good opponent for Man City because they'll take as many chances as Man City will, and I think Man City just have more quality. Now Brighton did beat them last year at the Amex 2-1, but as you say, the record against Man City has been poor. I think Man City will win this game. I'm going to go for a 3-1 Man City win.
Right, Gareth, next up, Nottingham Forest v West Ham United. I think a lot of people would probably be surprised that Nuno Espirito Santo is still there. He mentioned last week that his relationship isn't the same with Marinakis as it once was. What do you make of that situation? Of course, that to travel to Selhurst Park, it ended with a draw. We'll talk about Crystal Palace in a minute, but Nottingham Forest v West Ham. West Ham are struggling big time at the moment, 2 defeats.
Yeah, I think where we might see some movement on the Nuno situation is probably during this international break. There wasn't really enough time last week, I think, for he'd done that press conference the day before the game, or 2 days before the game, and there was an emergency meeting called, but I think it would have been a big risk from Nottingham Forest to rush into anything. And I think, obviously, this week...
But on that point, Gareth, isn't it really weird that a manager goes into a press conference and says that about the owner and says that their relationship? I think that sort of stuff should remain private. I was really surprised when Nuno come out and said, that about the owner. Our relationship isn't what it used to be, and we don't really talk anymore.
Yeah, well, Nuno's kind of always had that kind of hothead. He's had issues at Wolves, hasn't he? Where he fell out with people at Wolves and didn't really get a chance at Spurs to fall out with anyone because he wasn't there long enough. But from what I understand, there was a situation in the summer where Adama Traore, who plays for Fulham, was available. He wanted to sign him because obviously he knows him from Wolves. Adama's a bit of a trump card, isn't he? If you bring him off the bench, he can stretch teams and cause havoc. I think he wanted to bring him under the squad, but Eru, who is in charge of the recruitment now at Forest, obviously we know, as we spoke about, Chris, a lot of teams are signing players based on data, and Traore's output is very, very poor. But I think Nuno sees him as a player that can play right wing back, right wing, and counter-attacks. And Forest like to play in the counter-attack in a lot of games. He can give you something, maybe when teams are tiring. But he was told he is not a player that we want to sign, and I think ever since that, Nuno has been frustrated that he's not been able to bring in his own players. He feels that with the work he did last year and the season before, keeping them up, and then obviously that great season he had last year, he's earned the right to have a say in the transfers. But we're seeing this more and more now, Chris, where the managers are being told who's coming in, or they may have a choice of 2 or 3 players, and they have to, they give the go ahead of which player does, but they're given the profiles, they're given a whole load of videos to watch by people that have scouted these players. And it seems that Eru and Nuno's relationship is very, very poor. And of course, Marinakis is in the middle of that. He's hired Eru, he's hired Nuno, and he's almost as the middleman in there. And we know Marinakis is an our hothead, and he's not afraid to stick his oar in and say what needs to be said. So I do feel, Chris, that this has probably ran its course. I think there may be some movement in this now after the West Ham game because we've got a 2-week break. Nuno's clearly not happy. That press conference has angered Marinakis. And if he's got no relationship with his sporting director, something has to give, Chris. Either Marinakis has to get rid of Eru or he has to get rid of Nuno. You can't have 2 people working against each other. And I think that despite how well Nuno's done, I think it'll be him that pays the price. And look, that is the worry for Forest, that this is the most success they've had for a long time. But I think when you've got an owner like Marinakis who is really unpredictable, that it's going to be very difficult for them to get sustained success there, regardless of his ambition. Because Chris, when he came onto the pitch last year, that definitely undermined Nuno. That undermined the manager. And ever since then as well, that wouldn't have went down well with Nuno. So I do think there's problems ahead for Nottingham Forest.
I actually feel like Nuno conducted himself really well when Marinakis come on the pitch last year. That was embarrassing. It was really embarrassing for him. Um, I expect Nottingham Forest to win this game at City Ground on Sunday, which would put West Ham, still bottom of the league, 3 defeats out of 3 games. Nottingham Forest, they've won 1 and they've drawn 1 so far. So this would put them in a good position. Of course, as you mentioned, they're in Europe as well. Their fans are really behind Nuno Espirito Santo. You saw that at Selhurst Park in the draw last weekend. Nottingham Forest have won their last 3 Premier League matches against West Ham, having only won 2 of their first 11 against them in the competition, drawing 3 and losing 6. I can't see anything but a Nottingham Forest win, Gareth. I'm going to go 2-0. What are you going for?
I suppose before doing my prediction, we'll touch on West Ham, Chris, because I think we probably can't afford not to touch on them because it's been such a dismal start to the season.
Relegated?
I was at one time a big Graham Potter fan. I think the confidence in Graham Potter has obviously waned. I thought he had done a great job at Brighton, but I think he took the Chelsea job at the wrong time, and I think his confidence has took a massive hit since his time at Chelsea. And I think I think one of the issues that Graham Potter's always had, and we've seen it at Brighton, we've seen it at Chelsea, and we've seen it at West Ham, is his teams don't score enough goals. And I think sometimes they play good football, but they don't always convert. And his teams have poor conversion rates. And I think if you're not scoring goals and you're missing chances, you get punished at this level. I think that at the minute, the balance of that West Ham team is all wrong. There's a lack of legs and mobility in midfield. They've lost Antonio up front, who's been a huge loss. Kudos was their driving force. There's a lot of pressure on Jarrod Bowen. We've seen him falling out with the fans, and Chris, we've seen this with Eric Dyer at Spurs.
Yeah.
When there's players fighting with fans, and we've seen it last year with Ange and the fans at Bournemouth, it's never a sign of things. There's obviously more water under the bridge, and I think that the West Ham situation, they've got it all wrong. The fans have to take their partner. Chris, they hounded David Moyes out, who done an unbelievable job there. They wanted a more attractive style of football, but I tell you what, if they could wind the clock back now, they would take David Moyes back in a heartbeat because it hasn't worked. Lopetegui was a disaster. Graham Potter has had no impact at all. You mentioned there's 2 defeats in the league, but also that cup victory or the cup defeat the Wolves the other night, 2-1 up. West Ham would have looked at Crystal Palace last year, looked at Newcastle, and thought, why can we not have a cup run? And they're out of one cup already, and it looks like it's going to be an uphill battle. Now, I've seen today they have agreed a 42 million deal for Mateus Fernandes from Southampton, who I think will help them. He's a very good player. But I think they need a lot more than that, and they need a big few days in the window. It'll be interesting to see if they do lose this game, which we both expect they will, how much time Graham Potter gets, because I did worry for him after the Chelsea game because he looked totally lost on the sideline, Chris. He looked like he had no answers to the problems that were occurring on the pitch. And I think when you see a manager, but like we've seen with Ruben Amorim last night, looking deflated and looking like they're at their depth at a certain point, it's never a good sign.
Another manager. Yeah. Right. The 4:30 kickoff on Sunday is a huge game. Liverpool.
I'll do my prediction. I'm going to go for
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I'll do me 2-0 Forest 1.
Oh, same as me. Okay. Right. We've agreed on one. Right. So the huge game, 4:30 kickoff at Anfield. Liverpool take on Arsenal. Of course, 2 of the 3 sides that have won 2 out of 2 so far. A lot of people are saying, Gareth, and I hate to bring this up about Eze, but does Eze make Arsenal a even more bigger title contender? What have you made of them? They always struggle when they go to Anfield. We've got a particularly poor record away at Anfield as well. How do you see this one going?
I'm struggling with this one because, well, we'll start with Eze. I mean, Eze was a body blow for Spurs, but look, you can't believe everything you read. But if it sounds like he only had eyes for Arsenal, Chris, and if he had ended up at Spurs, I'm not sure how committed he would have been, because it sounds like he done everything he could to get Arsenal to sign him. Now, again, we're only reading what we see. We don't know the ins and outs of it, but he is an Arsenal boy. He seems very delighted to be there. So, look, maybe it was something that we were naive with. Maybe we should have been looking elsewhere from earlier in the window. If we knew Arsenal had preliminary talks with him in June, but didn't follow up their interest. But seems like there was always a chance they could do a deal there. But they definitely used Spurs their advantage. They seen what Spurs kind of fee and what kind of structure Spurs agreed, and they used that their advantage. The agent probably leaked it. The Arsenal had done the dealing. Spurs were left with their tail between their legs again. But I think Eze is a player that gives them something different, no doubt about it. They haven't really got a player like Eze. They've got a lot of different wingers. Odegaard, whilst he has an attacking midfielder, isn't the type of player that's going to dribble past players like Eze can. He's also very good from set pieces. We've seen him score a number of free kicks, including one at a game I was at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in a 3-1 defeat. He put them 1-0 up. It was a fantastic strike. There's no doubt he's a quality addition they would Arsenal have. And I do hate to say it, Chris, but looking at the three so-called title contenders, Arsenal look to be the best balanced team. They look solid at the back. They look to have the best goalkeeper. And they've got a lot of attacking options. And Gyökeres is off the mark as well. And that was always a good start for him. If he could get his first goal as early as possible, he gets it in the second game. And he scores a penalty afterwards as well. So Arsenal are coming into this game in good form, but losing Saka and Odegaard is a big blow for this game. I think Saka's going to be out for around 4 weeks. Odegaard's definitely not going to be ready for this game. But I wonder, will the Odegaard not being fit suit them more in this game, because they're at Anfield? Will they be a bit more resilient, be very strong physically in midfield? Eze comes in there, he's a bit stronger than Odegaard physically, so you could see a situation where they have Eze, Zubamendi and Rice, and that's a very physical midfield. And look, Florian Wirtz is a very talented player, but I think we've seen early on he has got a wake up call to how physical the Premier League is, because he was bullied a bit in the Bournemouth game, and he was really, really bullied against Newcastle the other night, against that really physical Newcastle midfield. And this is the issues that some of the Premier League teams have in signing players. Like, we signed a player, I know he's not anywhere near the level of Florian Wirtz, but you look at someone like Brian Hull, who, Chris, no doubt probably has some ability, but just the Premier League is not a league for a player like Brian Hull. And this is where you have to be so careful with your recruitment. That I've no doubt that Florian Wirtz will do well for Liverpool in time, but I just think it's going to take him a very long period to adjust to how physical the Premier League is. And I think against Arsenal as well, Florian Wirtz is going to be up against it. Do you know what? I was kind of going my head with a draw, Chris, but I'm not sure. How do you see this game?
I see Liverpool winning this game, and I feel like it's going to be a bit of a goal fest as well. I'll give you my score prediction first before I give you this stat. So I'm going to go for a 3-2 Liverpool win. Only Liverpool v Spurs 206 has seen more goals of a Premier League fixture than Arsenal against Liverpool, and that is 198. Since the 2015-16 campaign, it has seen the most goals of any fixture, 78 in 20 games. So that is nearly 4 goals per game since the 2015-16 campaign. It's a very, very difficult game. Anfield is a very, very difficult place to go. I can't see anything but Liverpool winning. And, that would put Liverpool in the driving seat, 3 wins out of 3. I tell you what, Gareth, if Arsenal can go to Anfield and get a result, then I'd be worried. But I can't see it. I can't see it this weekend.
I was looking there. They've drew their last 3 games at Anfield. I think all 1-1. Or sorry, 2 1-1s and a 2-2. They have been tight games. Arteta's got a very good record against the top 6 teams recently. I think they've over 20 games unbeaten. Chris, I'm not going to be popular here at all on this channel. I feel that Liverpool looks so vulnerable defensively. I think Arsenal could make it really, really difficult for them, and I'm going to go for a 1-0 Arsenal 1.
Do you want to be invited back on here?
I have to be honest, my credibility would go down. I just think that they could make it really difficult for Liverpool to score, and they could maybe catch some counter attack or set piece.
Is this the bit now where we say where can we find Gareth on social media?
And the bun.
Right, last up, Aston Villa v Crystal Palace. What have you made of these 2 teams so far, Gareth? And interestingly, this one is kicking off at 7 p.m. UK time on Sunday. Aston Villa at the moment are in 17th. I know these league positions don't mean a lot at this stage. Crystal Palace are in 14th. Crystal Palace have drawn both of their games so far. I feel like Oliver Glasner really good manager. Really do like him. Really do like the way that he conducts himself. I like the way that he is so animated in the technical area as well with his team. 2 draws so far. I feel like he makes Crystal Palace a very difficult team to beat, particularly in that Chelsea game in the opening weekend.
Yeah, but there's no doubt we spoke about him before, Chris. Over the last few weeks as well, we're very impressed by Oliver Glasner. I know you were particularly impressed when you seen him in action in May at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, of how he talks to these players, how he talks to these staff, how organised they were, and they were arguably the best performance I've seen from a team last year at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I thought they were absolutely excellent. Yes, Spurs were poor, but there's always a bit of both involved, and Palace were outstanding that day, and probably could have give Spurs a real hiding in terms of the scoreline. Spurs got off quite late, but Chris, just one or two things you're starting to sense with Glasner, that he's not happy with how the business is being done. You know, he's not happy that they've lost Eze. He's not happy that Mark Gahey could be on his way out, because Steve Parrish just says we can't afford to lose Gahey for free next year. You know, I feel like Liverpool are having defensive problems. That's a no-brainer. I think that is a.
But there's no manager. There's no manager, Gareth, that would be happy with that.
But I just wonder, will Oliver Glasner look at it and go, maybe his ceiling could be higher than Crystal Palace, and I wonder if I know they're signing a player, is it Pino? I think from Villarreal's a deal's been agreed for around 25 million. He's seen as the Eze replacement. But if they lose Gahey, losing Gahey and Eze would be huge. And I think Liverpool need a defender. Gahey wants to go there. It wouldn't surprise me if that deal's done, but losing Gahey and Eze would be a huge loss. Of course, they get through this second leg now on Thursday night, 1-0 up. I would expect them to do that. But that squad's going to be tested, because playing Thursday, Sunday, Chris, for a team that's not used to it is difficult. Palace don't have the biggest squad, so it's going to be difficult for them to rotate all their players, even if they are playing lesser opposition. I think Palace need to be very, very busy in the next few days. Give Oliver Glasner the support he needs to compete in the Premier League and the Conference League, because if they can do enough business, Chris, there's no reason they can't do what West Ham did and won the Europa Conference League, because they've got a great manager who's got a European pedigree. He won the Europa League with Frankfurt. He knows how to get teams organised for them types of games. And I think Palace fans will be more than happy to finish 13th, 14th if it meant going far in the Conference League and possibly ending up with winning that trophy. Because one, it's a European trophy that they'd never won, and two, it gets them on the Europa League for next season. I think it could possibly be easier for Crystal Palace to qualify for the Europa League via winning that than it would be to finish in the top 6 or 7 in the league. But it'd be interesting to see if Glasner's unhappy come the end of the window, because if he is, there'll be a lot of clubs looking at Oliver Glasner. None more, in my opinion, than Man United. If Man United have to make a change, I can't think of any manager out there that would be better suited to go into Man United than Oliver Glasner, because Premier League experience, European pedigree, gets the best out of what he has and gets teams organised, and he's very flexible. And that's one thing we're seeing with Ruben Amorim at the moment, is he's very inflexible. And I think at the minute, all the top managers, Chris, are very, very flexible, and you need to be flexible in the modern day game.
Now, head to head, Aston Villa v Crystal Palace played 40. Each team has won 15 and 10 draws, so it's very even. The last couple of results with these two sides. The last Premier League fixture, Crystal Palace beat Aston Villa 4-1 in Feb 2025. And the most recent one was in the FA Cup, where Crystal Palace beat Villa 3-0 in April 25. So Crystal Palace have put 7 past Aston Villa in their previous 2 games in all competitions. I'm going 1-1.
Palace have had the upper hand in these games. They've had them in the counter-attack in most of these games. I remember the semi-final of the FA Cup last year. Palace absolutely bossed Villa. Ismail Sarr and Eze ran riot. Mateta as well has a big hand in it. But I worry for Villa. I said this last week, Chris. I thought they would get past Brentford, but I still says I worry for them based on what I've seen over the summer and how they performed against Newcastle. But my concerns are very, very accelerated now, because that was a poor performance last week. They're struggling to do any business because of PSR. If I was Spurs now, I would be testing the water with Morgan Rogers and giving them big money, because I think he's a player that could give us a real impact and give us a different look. And he's a very talented player. Even if it went to 75, 80 million, I think he's worth it in this market. And I think Villa, if push came to shove, maybe tempted to sell just to do some business in the last few days. But Emery's cycles tend to tend to they run out after a few years, Chris, and I wonder if Unai Emery, if Aston Villa could possibly need a change, because Villa fans are becoming frustrated with his tactics as well. We've seen this before with Emery, where he does a brilliant job, but there's a struggle to maintain it over so many years. And I think if results don't improve, I mean, he'll be under huge pressure despite all the success he's had at Villa. At the minute, they don't look like a team that are going to be capable of competing in the Europa League and the Premier League. They're already struggling to compete in just the one competition. So, very, very big game for Aston Villa. I think they need to get a win, Chris. But I'm looking at it, and from your way, I think it'll be a draw. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
It's rubbing off on you, all these draws. Right. Yeah. Gareth, what I should have asked you, Nottingham Forest, if Nuno Espirito Santo does go, do you think that there is a genuine possibility of Ange Postecoglou returning to the Premier League under Marinakis, because we know that they know each other well?
Well, apparently there was a conversation in the summer with Eru and Marinakis and Nuno that Forest want to become a more attractive team. They want to be more on the front foot, and I mean, I think that's crazy. Why step away from something that's given you success? Although towards the end of last season, they were struggling a wee bit. But, you know, Nuno wasn't that type of manager. He's never been a team that's going to get on the front foot. He's very good at organising teams defensively, set pieces and counterattacks and transitions. And look, maybe all signs and roads lead there to me that the Nuno thing's going to come to an end, probably sooner rather than later. The international break, you feel maybe the perfect time to do it. If Nuno's not happy, Eru's not happy, the chairman's not happy, then it's best for everyone to get out of it. But I think the Forest fans will be fuming, because they are right behind Nuno. Ange, of course, has that, as you say, relationship with Marinakis. But it's one thing having a relationship off the pitch, and one thing working for that man, because he's a very difficult man to deal with. From an attractive point of view, I mean, you couldn't get two more contrasting styles. Ange Postecoglou's teams play attractive style of football. It's kamikaze, it's chaotic. Do you think Forest would benefit from that? I don't. I think they're better suited with a manager like Nuno. But look, this Marinakis boy, he's capable of anything. So no, it wouldn't surprise me if Big Ange ended up at Nottingham Forest. And look, I think it would be brilliant for the Premier League to have Big Ange back. Also, Big Ange and Marinakis working together, I think, because we know Ange is outspoken as well. I think that would be brilliant. There's also reports, Chris, that maybe Mourinho could be an interest in West Ham. I think it would be great to have Jose back in the Premier League as well. Just from the fact that he's an absolute monster in front of the cameras in his box office. So I mean, if you've Big Ange and Nuno back, or Big Ange and Mourinho back in the Premier League, I think it makes it more intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Gareth, enjoy your holiday. Thank you so much for joining me. These episodes are getting a lot longer.
Well, that's up, but I think we looked at, Chris, and more you than myself, that there has been a lot of engagement on it, and there's a lot of people putting in their scores, and I think it's a great way to get people ready, because everyone gets excited on a Thursday or Friday for the Premier League weekend. You know, you're coming to the end of the week, you're finishing work, you're looking to see what the 12:30 game is, plan your weekend around it. So no, I think the shows are doing well, and it's great to see so many people putting their score predictions on. Long may it continue.
Well, Gareth, I know I joked about this earlier, but before you do go, where can people find you? What you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, you can find me on that handle underneath there, Enquiries Hotspurs. As I say, I'm going on holidays today, so I'll be looking forward to watching all the football over the weekend and in the sun. And we had a couple of drinks. They quench the thirst, of course. Hopefully, see Spurs get off the 9 points from their first 3 games, and who knows, could be top of the league come Sunday evening. And that's a great way they start the season. So I wake up on Monday, and I hope they see some activity before Monday, but if not, on Monday in the transfer window. But look, whatever happens, I'm confident Thomas Frank will give this club the step in the right direction that it needs.
Well, Gareth, thank you so much. Have a great holiday, and we will talk to you again very soon. Thanks to everybody for watching and listening and putting all your score predictions in. And we will be back for another edition of this after the international break for match week 4. Enjoy your weekend, everyone. Stay safe and well, and come on, you Spurs.